Hello and happy Tuesday if you are watching this on Tuesday. um, welcome as you are coming in live, and welcome to those of you who are watching this on the replay. I am Lisa McNett. I am the founder of One Breath Institute. I'm a breathwork practitioner and trainer. And at One Breath Institute, we have just opened enrollment for our first module of our breathwork practitioner training. So the first module is a 10-week program. It's open to everyone. You do not need to train to be a breathwork facilitator to be a part of this program, and I'll share a little bit more about what that is at the end. Excuse me. Welcome, Shelley. I see you are here, and I can't always see who's here, but I see some others. So just welcome to everyone who is here live, and again, who is here on the replay. So today, what does that mean? What is your 2-year-old self trying to tell you? That's the topic of the day, right? So what is your 2-year-old self trying to tell you? And I titled it that for a couple different reasons, but essentially we, these human beings, these human people that we are holding on to, we develop certain, I'm sorry, I got a little distracted by some noises in the background, so I'm just going to come back to the focus, refocus, recenter. So as we are growing, we develop certain belief systems about the world, and we adapt, we create patterns of being and patterns of behavior based on the environment in which we are living. And it's like developmental strategies, right? So depending on what type of household we grew up in and what our caregivers are like, our siblings are like, we are developing strategies. Like even as an infant has to develop a strategy to survive. An infant is essentially, an infant won't live, right? If somebody does not care for that infant. So that infant needs to learn that's why infants cry, and they have different cries for if they're hungry, different cries for if they want their mom, or their, different cries for if their diaper's wet. And, typically the caregiver or the mother is, when you give birth, there are hormones that are released into the body and that make you more empathic and more capable of determining what the baby is trying to communicate, right? So I know Debbie has a 3-month-old, and I hear this from her, and I've heard this from many, many moms. I am not a mother myself, so I've never had this experience, that they do know. They know. I've been on a call with Debbie, and she's like, hold on, that cry, she needs me. And I've heard that from other parents, right? They need me. So anyway, this continues on as we are, moving through elementary school and, different relationships. We are always developing new patterns and strategies. And when we are faced with any sort of trauma or surprise, right, we also develop a new unconscious, this is all unconscious, pattern or skill to prevent, right? So we might avoid certain things. Like if I had something happen on an airplane, then I might have developed a fear of flying, and I'm going to avoid flying now, right? Because I don't want to come in contact with that thing which caused trauma. If I was in an abusive relationship, I might swear off, being in another relationship. So like that. But it's all unconscious. It's all unconscious. We are not conscious of any of it. Taking a breath, because that's a lot of information. So just let that absorb for a moment. And now, oh yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing, just to make it more relatable. If you've ever had an injury, right? Like a shoulder injury is a big one, but any sort of injury, all of the tissues go to repair that injury, right? And the injury can become everything wants to protect that space. So if we have a shoulder injury, we might stop using our shoulder so much. We might stop using that arm so much. Some of you may have experienced this. And when we do that, it creates a bigger issue. And that's why if you've ever had like a broken bone or anything that's been in a cast for a long time, you have to start moving it again. You have to start moving it, and it's painful, and we don't want to do that, but we need to. So I say that for a reason, because I'm going to come back to that physical pain that we experience when we start working with some of our unconscious patterns and beliefs. It can be a little bit challenging to do so because we might have to look at some painful things, but we can do it gently. So, have you ever reacted to something or acted some way and you're like, why did I do that? Right? Why did I do that? Or like you have a pattern of like getting angry about the same thing, or you say, I'm never gonna get mad about that again, or I promise I'm not gonna yell at you for that next time, and then you do again, right? Automatically, and then you feel like all this shame and guilt later. Like I'm definitely guilty of that. I think probably most of us can relate to that. So that, and we're like, gosh, we beat ourselves up. We have the shame, we have this guilt, and we're like, why did I do that? Why can't I change this, right? Why can't I change this certain pattern? Why can't I stop, dating the same person, or, whatever it is. There's a lot of blind spots that we have that we're like, why do I keep doing this? And this is why. Older back in time pattern that we have developed at a younger age, a strategy for being, belief systems that are unconsciously driving our behavior. And we can change it. We can change it by having some compassion for ourselves, stopping and breathing when we've done something, or there's something that we need to explore about ourselves because we don't like it or love it, or it's not working for us. We can breathe with it, and we can feel into our body. Where is this coming from? Where do I feel this inside my body? What's underneath this? Because there's a feeling underneath it, right? There's a feeling underneath it. And how old was I? Sometimes we can just look. How old was I? And you might take some practice, but I really encourage you to trust whatever answers come up, right? Trust whatever answers come up. And so we might have some answers come up, but we still need to work through the feeling part of it, because we might know, right? Okay, well, I can say this is because this happened to me when I was blah, blah, blah age. But that's not going to change it. We need to go in and work with the feelings of it and allow those feelings to process. So, the reason I called this, what is your 2-year-old self trying to tell you, is because that is really 2 years old. We are probably familiar with the term of the terrible twos, right? The terrible twos. The terrible twos. So, what are the terrible twos? When we hit about 2 years old, of course this isn't exact, but it's around that 2-year-old mark. My nephew is not 2 years old yet, but we're seeing it with him, and it's pretty cool to see. That's about the time that you develop your sense of self. Like up until about 2, you don't realize that you're separate from everything, right? You are like one with your environment and your parents, and you don't realize that you can have really your own choices and you can have your own preferences. And so it's around 2 years old that you recognize the separateness of yourself, and so you want to start testing those boundaries. It's a natural thing to start testing those boundaries. Okay, well, where do I end? And where do I end and where do they begin? And where do I get my preferences and where do I get my say? And why don't I get my say, right? So if I want avocados, and that might be the weirdest thing that you've ever heard for me to say, or the 2-year-old might want, but my nephew, who has loved avocados and still does. So avocados are one of his favorite things. So before, he might have eaten everything that you give him, but now if he wants an avocado, he wants an avocado. Like, and they start determining their strategy for how to get things, right? So even from an infant, as I mentioned earlier, we are developing a strategy for how to get what we want. And when we're around that 2-year-old mark, we have greater capacity, we have more skills with which to learn to get what we want, right? So this is where the temper tantrums start to come in, right? Temper tantrums start to come in. When I was a baby and I would cry, then I would get food, right? This is what I would do. I would cry and I would get food. Okay, so this is I might have more skills now. I might have some words that I can use. But crying got me what I needed before. So I'm going to try crying, and I'm going to try some other behaviors with that. And so the parent, what is the parent's reaction to that? What is the parent's response to that? How does the parent work with that 2-year-old child? And, we're in a culture that is very different, right? Very different than it was hundreds of years ago, much less, even hundreds of years ago, where the caregiver, we used to grow up in more community, right? There used to be, maybe more women in the tribe taking care of the children. And so now there's really less space, with helping a child to develop, and less patience of the caregivers, and less time, and less time. And so, no fault of anyone's, but this has been the way it has probably for most of us. It's been like this. So with, caregivers, parents working more, not available more, not around more, stressed and tired and tense and all of that more, they're just what am I going to do? Like, to get this baby to stop crying, right? What am I going to do? So yeah, I just saw, yes, time. Time is a thing, right? And I know, it's not pleasant when there's a baby like throwing a temper tantrum and yelling and screaming. And so this is no judgment whatsoever. I'm just speaking to how we develop these things. So, however our parents worked with us when we were 2, or didn't work with us when we were 2, whatever strategies they had for getting us to just be quiet and stop throwing the temper tantrums, we are still employing, we are still unconsciously playing out those same strategies to get what we want when we're 24 or 44 or 64, right? So maybe that's a light bulb for someone, or for some of us. So I remember in a training that I did, quite a few years ago, and we talked about this. We talked about the strategies that we adapt and how we unconsciously play those strategies out, as adults, and we can be in victim mode, and there's a whole lot I can share about this. But it's something you can start paying attention to when you watch others, right? When you see other people in our life. Children, not necessarily children, sure, but I'm talking about adults, friends, coworkers, whomever you are encountering, like when they start like behaving in a way or speaking in a way or having a meltdown or something that doesn't really seem aligned with their age, or seem, like they're coming from a centered place, you can kind of look, okay, what age does that look like? What age does that look like? And it might look like a teenager, right? Like, I don't need you. I'm the independent one. I don't need anybody. Or it might look like, a 7-year-old. What does that look like? Or it might look like a 2-year-old, right? There might be huffing and puffing and temper tantrum until I get what I want. So if we can look at what's happening with others, when we see this happening, oftentimes we have a response, like we get engaged and argue, like fall into an argument or fall into a judgment or something along those lines. But if we can look at that and be like, oh, I see a scared 7-year-old, or oh, I see a 2-year-old who, is learning about life, and is trying to understand how to communicate their needs, right? So if we can start to look at, and I don't mean we're not going to go and tell that person, you're acting like a 2-year-old right now, right? But if we can start to identify, then we can have some more empathy for and some more compassion for what's happening. And from that place, we can help them work through it by not giving into their trigger, right? How would I work with a 7-year-old who's afraid? How would I speak to a 7-year-old who's afraid? How would I speak to a 2-year-old? How would I speak to a 14-year-old? What do I think needs to happen here besides just like getting angry and getting into a fight? And then we can start to, sometimes that external visual, we can start to then identify our own behavior, because it's blind, right? It's blind. When something happens, you're like, why did I do that, right? But once we start to see it in others, sometimes that can help us identify it more quickly in ourselves when it's happening. So anyway, thank you for your time. I'm always going over. I love coming in and just talking about this stuff because it's important. So I'll leave you with that. I welcome your comments, questions below, as always. And so we are taking discovery calls for our facilitator training and for the personal journey. Again, the personal journey is open to everyone, and it is sort of like working with me one-to-one, but better than that, because with the group dynamic, we get to be mirrors and reflections for one another. You have the opportunity to really connect with other people through different processes, and start to identify and you're welcome, Beth. So it's the group element to this work just takes it to a whole nother level of healing. And so the intention and the idea behind the 10-week program, and I can tell you myself personally, working with people for a 10-week period of time, I've had clients stop drinking, stop smoking, recognize that job is really unhealthy for them, and so walk away from it and, move into a different line of work that is more aligned with them and more passionate. So you can have really profound this is a life-changing journey. this is a life-changing journey. So if that's something that is interesting in, that you are interested in, reach out to me, comments below or in direct message, and let's schedule a discovery call and talk about it. All right, take care and have a beautiful rest of your day.